Welcome to Living and Dying. This is the show that tells you all you need to know about the people and the activities of Brattleboro Area Hospice. My name is Richard Ewald, and I'm a hospice volunteer. I'm honored to be joined today by Deidre Scherer, an artist of Williamsville, Vermont, whom I've known for about 25 years. And Deidre's career has taken her deep into the portrayal of those who are dying in a way that I think has changed a lot of people's ideas about death and dying. And I think at a time when there's a lot more conversation about death and dying, I think these images have helped to stimulate so many conversations and to bring a real public awareness to something that has been too often private.
I hope. Even the terminology of death and dying, as if we can die and then continue to die. That's a thing that I caught.
Oh, instead of dying in death?
Yeah. Isn't that awkward?
It's not as alliterative.
Yeah. So.
I think we continue to live.
That's right.
I'd like to talk about how the arc of your artistic life has led you to these portraits and talk a bit about where you see it going from there. And I just spent some time with my grandkids recently, and you try to see the adult in the child and see some of the formative influences. So what in your family sort of empowered you into a life of art?
Well, both of my parents were artists. My mother was a dancer, but my father worked at the Museum of Natural History in New York. And he did those dioramas in the backdrops of the dioramas that have the animals out front. So there's a seamlessness to his work. And all of my training really started there with him giving me the palette to work with, how to mix color, how to think about color, and line and drawing. So long before I was in Rhode Island School of Design, I was getting a training right at home.
So you and I actually must have met in a way through the Museum of Natural History, because I spent much of my childhood in front of those things saying, how in the world did they do that?
I'd play hooky. I'd go down with his carpool and spend the entire day running around the museum, sketching things from all mediums. So it opened me up not just to oils, but to other mediums, including beadwork, clay, everything.
So at RISD, what did you focus on at RISD?
Actually, I focused on a lot of things, and that kind of, I was told you might end up being jack of all trades, master of none, but that's kind of a funny turn of events because I'm so focused. I often wish I had that, you know, I still do, but change of mediums and change of focus. I was in painting, that was useful, and I was in illustration, and then I took art education.
Well, you're clearly a very talented draftsperson. You're good with line and color, all that came together. Can you tell us how you transitioned from 2 dimensions to 3 in working with fabric?
Thank you for that, because a lot of people do think of the fabric as a flat surface, and one of its pulls for me is that it has such textural presence, and we also know it from one of our biggest senses is our sense of touch. It's, you know, compared to eyes and ears, it's full body, and we're wrapped in fabric from the day we're born to the day we die. So there's a knowledge about it which is tactile, and those bells are rung. Even if you can't literally touch it, you're remembering. Did I take a course off there? I'm thinking that the big move was when my children were quite young and I was working in the same room, often at night while they slept. And I couldn't think of using the fumes of oils or batik. I tried batik for a while, but there's a lot of, you know, the wax So it gradually became evident that I could carry on with fabric.
Mm-hmm.
I was all thumbs. My earliest fabric work, I had a long way to push, and that was exciting too, to have the challenge. I didn't know how to do it off the top of my head. I had to figure it out.
And it's not like you could study with someone who was already doing this.
No, I didn't see anyone doing figurative work to
Mm-hmm.
that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a progression. I started with looking for subject. I did a series of birds. I did out the West River was one of my big
Mm-hmm.
friends, buildings, and it was the tarot cards that led me into calling up at Linden Lodge and asking, can I come in and draw people so that I could find queens for the tarot?
Mm-hmm.
And I never went back to the cards. The queens became my subject area. The elders caught me.
What was it, do you think, that caught you about that?
Well, many things. First of all, I never had an image of myself growing old.
Hmm.
I think that, like a lot of our generation, we were entrained quite early to duck and cover. Do you recall this?
Mm-hmm. Under
the desk.
Because
and
the bomb is going to drop, or we're being attacked. And,
yes,
yeah.
and did you believe that?
No.
Yeah. What did you actually believe?
We were immortal.
Yeah, you were, well, actually, I believe the opposite, that you were going to go onto your desk and you'd be incinerated.
We'd be obliterated.
Yeah. So not only my death,
Mm-hmm.
but the death of the world.
Hmm.
And this generation has a fixation on death, violent death.
Hmm.
We see it in the news,
Mm-hmm.
we see it in television, and every single, big name movie has blowing explosions with bodies flying ahead of it. And it's not there's nothing real about this
Mm-hmm.
myth. Most of us do die of a full life, of a full natural life. And it's still possible that we could really go wrong. But it seems that making the images of a full life and dying of old age, dying of a full life, can actually change that viewpoint that's been entrained since our childhoods.
What has it been like to go into a nursing home or a hospital and spend time with an individual? What is it from their point of view that you've asked them to do, just to witness?
Oh yeah.
As they're there, you bring your drawing materials and you sketch them as they're laying in bed, perhaps connected to IVs, breathing tubes.
That's a mouthful. What happens is that I'm terrified upon approaching.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel, I think there's something about drawing and even photographing, and I'll do both. There's something about it that you feel a great responsibility. I feel that I'm witnessing an incredibly important place for that person, that they're perhaps tying up all the, tying up or unraveling or raveling and moving through their lives, even if they're not, they could be in a coma, and I still believe that they're working. And a sense I have about it, that I'm not alone. Initially, I also felt like, what right did I have to witness and observe and do these drawings? And then I had a nurse or somebody on hand say, this is a two-way street. They're picking up your attention and because it's a silent process, except for the little bit of scratching going on. It's a very, you're really listening with your eyes and your hand.
Well, they've given you permission.
They have.
To be in their presence. And it strikes me that you are there with much the same attitude that any hospice volunteer is, which is to witness and to be of service. And in a way, you're, in my mind, you're serving them by honoring with dignity their condition and their lives. And in a larger sense, you're helping others see what you see when you're with them?
Very often I'll take my book to the people I want to work with, and they will flip through and find a section in here, maybe from the last year, and say, there we are. They have a recognition, even if it's a woman looking at a man or vice versa, they'll identify that this is the story being told. And they come out of a place where they feel a section in here, maybe from the last year, and say, there we are. They have a recognition, even if it's a woman looking at a man or vice versa, they'll identify that this is the story being told. And they come out of a place where they feel pretty isolated by our culture because of the pioneer and the wilderness of the subject area.
Yeah.
They get to invite me in that way.
Speaking of being and feeling isolated, I noticed that the work seemed to go from single subjects.
Yeah.
And then there's been a period where you were showing individuals with their family members or support person as expressing more community.
Yeah. The first series was, I stumbled into it. I was working with one person, we befriended each other, and as the months went on, she was getting weaker. She would have ups and downs. And this became a series called The Last Year. And I decided I'd keep hold of it and keep it public. I could not divide it up, or it's 9 pieces, actually 10 now. And it's this one individual and in her decline through the months. I didn't do them one at a time. I had all the drawings and I would work on one drawing and the other, and then I made the chronology occur later. Actually, I had to buy back one of them and rebuild another that I had let go of. And it was only after that was complete that I worked with the second group, the Surrounded by Family and Friends. And for that, I got a grant from the Open Society, the Project on Death in America. And I was able to work 2.5 years to build it. 6 images, life-size, tableaus showing different family relationships, cultures, ages, people that are, because I realized we don't die in a vacuum. We die out of a community, out of family. We leave a hole. And I wanted to really witness for the entire situation as much as I could.
From the standpoint of a viewer, it's more reassuring to see someone accompanied than alone, and yet the image of people alone is the reality of how we die, in a sense.
I must die my own death. And that is, there's something comforting in that too. No one else can do that for you. And the fact that we have a culture that can show all those, images of violent bodies being blown apart, and yet we don't have a conversation that talks about how over 85–90% of us will die is bewildering. We also don't do a very good job with birth, and there's a similar fact in that all of us come in and are born, and all of us have our first breath, and all of us I will get my last breath. And I actually want to be awake for that, because I don't remember much about my birth. I would like to be there.
A lot of your work is shown in gallery shows, and I try to put myself in the position of any artist, a painter, photographer who attends an opening and then hears responses from viewers who are walking through the show and getting that kind of feedback from people who are seeing the images, and I'm wondering what that's like in this very different set of images.
Yeah. it's close and it's emotional. I will often experiencing people who are in tears, or they're often tears of happiness, that the subject matter in a memory was supported by the images. The fact that they're images, the fact that they're visual, crosses the language barrier. I've shown them in Montreal, where, you know, whether you're French speaking or English or Dutch, it doesn't matter, that you're looking and understanding it through the visual and not through the left brain, right brain thing. I'm dyslexic, so I don't know which is which, but you are taking in information and coming to it with what you already have, and then often what you don't. Through emails, I will get people saying, I just visited my great aunt and she was looking very much like that piece in your series, and you prepared me for, so I could go right through that immediate jolt to really being present, really being with her. And that makes me feel like the work has done its job.
I would think that a gallery owner or representative who is interested in showing some of your work has already sort of crossed a threshold to do that, and yet I understand that there was at least one gallery where you took the show surrounded by family and friends, which includes a child, an image of a dying child.
Right.
And that gallery owner didn't want to show that one.
Yeah, there was a pause there and some consideration about maybe we should only keep the 5, which are older people. And the one I call Child pictures a woman holding a child who could be very near, if not having just died. That image was built with a lot of help from people who had lost their children. It was through Moses House, a lot of information that came from different sources, and so I composited it. And what I found was the biggest tragedy was not just that the child had died, but they had, the family and everyone with that child had died in isolation. We put blinders on when it's out of sequence. We don't want to talk about it at all. And so I actually did it just after my mother died, and it was part of my process of grieving.
You used the phrase raveling and unraveling a little while ago. Talk about that some more.
I had actually started a project which included taking pieces from my years of imagery, and they're on paper, and taking the paper and weaving it. So it's going from the fabric images onto paper and back into being woven as a fabric. And even that is sort of a raveling, unraveling.
So does this have something to do with memory and life?
Yes, this has got a lot to do with how we find ourselves, and that we are constantly reevaluating and moving. You know, the strands that run through our lives, the threads that are there, the cross threads and the weft and the warp. I'm not a weaver, but someone actually came into the studio and said, that's finger weaving, and we have all done that, even from kindergarten. Yet I was playing with the imagery of our, you know, presence, our beings.
Do you mean you start with a drawing, and then you create a portrait with fabric by layering the fabric and sewing it together?
You got it.
And then you create a color.
I take a scan and a color print of it.
And then you tear?
And then I tear it, destroy it. I tear it apart and then reweave it. Would you like to see how?
Sure, yeah.
Here, let's
see how that works.
Slide over here. You're going to have to help me.
Okay.
down on that corner, and I'm going to take what's the weft part of the piece and start to tear it along that straight edge. And I like following up and down over the information that's already there. So I'm crossing over, capturing the mouth in this tear, or part of it, as it turns out. And when I get to the end of that tear, it's ready to go right into the warp. So it goes right across like that. And then I snug it down. And I see her coming together gradually. Got that backwards. And I can make it all sort of move off, like the mouth could almost look like it's moving. And then I bring it in and start turning it up the other way, counterbalancing it and keeping it in there. And when that's up, I'll tear another one. So there is a way that it's unraveling and I'm tearing it apart and then it's coming together. And this is, it reminds me of a lot of things. It's very pleasing to work with it and do it.
What does it remind you of?
It reminds me of how much discovery goes on with the end of life and somebody losing parts of their life to dementia or coming in and out. That's the process. So then this next one would go right on in, somewhere in there.
Wow. I think of end of life as mostly involving an unraveling, as we sort of thin out a little bit and sort of come apart. And yet you're turning this around and saying that there's something in the process that it's also a reweaving.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I mean, without a doubt. I just don't believe in the spirit disappearing. It's like electricity. It's like energy. And I just feel that it, moves on and changes, transitions. And that's pretty open to any, religious connotation, but it is, it just feels like it can't be all. It just feels like something else is at foot.
There's more.
There's more.
There's more. And speaking of more,
this is a
maybe you could show that
drawing that I'm using for a cartoon of, it's a cartoon of a piece for Holton Home. And they're looking for a sponsor. But as I'm developing it, I've been studying a group of people at the end of life for this woman in the center. Their cat, Pumpkin, is here. Actually is that kind of a cat that you hear about that often will go and stay and, cover for that person. There are caregivers, holding hands or even just wiping her brow. And this piece is remarkable because it'll be life-size. This is a small version in the drawing step. This piece will be quite big, and it will be in their lobby so that when people come to visit, it will kickstart that kind of conversation. And so I'm incredibly proud of their awareness of that dialogue.
It sounds to me that Holton House is, in a sort of small way, reflects perhaps a larger impact that you've had with your work over the last 25 years or so, because I'm thinking...
it wouldn't have happened 25 years ago.
No, it wouldn't, but I think it was about that long ago, in 1990 or so, that you and I collaborated on an article in Hospice magazine.
Yeah.
and it was right on the cover. And of course, for Hospice magazine to have that image was complete, it made complete sense. But at the time, most nursing homes wanted to pretend that nothing like this ever happened.
Yeah. That
everything was a sunny day and we're all having a good time here and let's not talk about what goes on behind the closed doors. And yet, I see a genealogy through Pam Mayer, who helped found Brattleboro Area Hospice.
Yeah.
And through the Brattleboro Area Hospice itself.
Yep. And it's my work that brought me to the hospice in Brattleboro to take the training. It's like it was yanked right out of my artist's seat to understand what was this material, what are the questions, you know, what is it that I'm dealing with and doing, and Pam was part of that. She was a big part of that. It is amazing as you're reflecting back to 25 years ago, but even today I will be asked to, can we use these images in this program? I'll say yes, and it could be in England, it could be in California, and often there'll be that tenderness that people, one time they had the At Night up on the screen, and in front of it a cartoon character. I know, because the graphics person had a fear, and they were portraying that fear, no longer, you know, and I had to ask them to change it.
And they did.
And they did. But it was amazing even to see people who they'll take one of the images and put it on a little angle, cute angle, that, like on a clipboard, just to make it more fun. It's like people reveal themselves so much, and I reveal myself by, you know, the whole, I think I still have trouble talking. You know, I can visualize it because I'm an artist, but having that courage, you know, to say, this is what this is. This is, and the other thing about it is how much alive it gives my life, because I am certainly now aware that I am mortal, and that there's an infinite distance between that and never thinking you're going to die. That you only have a given time. I try to imagine, what do I want to do with these years? You know, and really look at them as, you know, this is the amount of time granted or given, and how to stretch that out and make it huge. Well,
I think you're succeeding. And I think that for you to have had the impact you've had in the art world, on Brattleboro itself, on everyone who reads the book and sees the images, it's sacred work that you have actually, you had to do it in yourself first before it got there.
Sacred work. I think it did it to me more than I did it to the work. It's the work doing it. I just had to open up, crack it open.
Well, anyone who wants to learn more about Deidre can go to her website, and this has been a very special show for us to be able to do this.
Thank you.
And bring this to as many people as we can. Once again, Deidre Scherer, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Rich.
My name is Richard Ewald. This is Living and Dying, or Dying and Living, and all at the same time.
Like that.
And thank you for joining us.